In this next chapter, Custom Hand Control Interfaces, you're going to need to install the Pen Attribute Holder 2.05 MS script that ships with the DVD. That should be placed in your 3D Studio Max 6 or 7 or even version 5 STD plugs, STD scripts folder, and then restart 3D Studio Max. Once that's installed and running, you'll be able to pick any object and find it in the modifier list. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a control object on the back of the hand. In this case, I'm just going to use a circle as the control object. I'm just going to place it up in the back of the hand somewhere that's easy to grab. And so that it follows the rig, I'm just going to rig it up, or link it up, to the hand bone so that it follows the hand around. This control object now is going to contain all of the animation tracks for our hand and the control interface stored in the modifier panel. Let's take a look at the Pen Attribute Holder. Open the modifier panel, scroll down, you can see Pen Attribute Holder 2, and add that. It's a nice compressed interface that allows you to be able to do multiple things. Store preset values, add preset values, delete them, delete all, save the presets out to a file, load them in from a file, merge them in from a file, as well as copy and paste the pose from one hand to another, or either from one character's hand to another, even if they're set up the same, and ramp values up and down. Essentially, this is going to be our custom attribute holder, just like we did in the first DVD of the intermediate series, where we used the built-in attribute holder that ships with 3D Studio Max, which is called attribute holder, but doesn't have any kind of control interface to help us deal with poses. What we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that we actually have a spinner and slider connected together. Now you can actually do this in a very easy way. I'm going to say new script, CA equals attributes handcon, we'll call it, parameters and P, the rollout we'll call hand R, and then a rollout. So I'll explain how this works again. The first statement, attributes handcon, defines an attribute, a custom attribute definition called handcon. We're going to use CA as just a variable and store this whole definition in CA. The first block, the parameter block, stores the parameters that will be used. This is all the tracks of animation that will be used. The rollout holds the interface. This is a rollout. And we need to add parameters and UI items and have them connected together basically, so that when we adjust a rollout item, a UI item, it controls whatever the value is in the parameter. I'm just going to make up a dummy one real quick, and we'll just call this finger. So the parameter type is going to be called finger. The type will be a float value, so anything like 1 or 1.2 or 5.6. 6. The And then we need some sort of rollout item. So in this case, we're going to use two. First one is going to be a spinner. Oops. Not a sinner. A spinner called finger SP for spinner. And I'm not going to give it any title in the UI. The next one's going to be a slider called finger SL for slider. And I'll call it a finger. Now these two aren't connected in any way, shape, or form. And currently our parameter isn't connected to them. So I'm going to connect it to both of them. So what we say is UI. Oops. And then we list the actual UI items. So we can actually list multiple UI items for a single parameter type. Let's evaluate this and make sure it evaluates okay. Cust attributes dot add. We'll add our attribute to the object. We're going to add to a given item. That's going to be this item. So in this case, we'll just say $, the currently selected item. We're going to add it to the first modifier in the list. So dot modifiers 1 being the first one. If I evaluate just this line, it'll return back the attribute holder 2. And then the next parameter we need to pass it is the attribute, and we've stored that in a value called CA, and if we evaluate that, you can see that it returns back the hand attribute definition. So I'll evaluate this line with just a shift enter. And nothing happens whatsoever. Oh, that's interesting. It seemed to be adding it but not updating it. Maybe this was a Max 6 issue that I'm not sure of. We now have 2. So let me start again. I will add the modifier, evaluate the script, and just select and unselect and deselect it, and it looks like it actually did add it. So now what we have is a spinner and slider that are connected together through the attribute. So when you change the value of finger slider, it's passing the value into the parameter, which is immediately passing it back to the spinner. So now you can actually have two of them connected together. With a bit of fooling around, you can actually make them a little closer together each time. So I've just pushed them a little bit closer together. So each time I've been adding it, you can see that it's now compressed it together. So that looks like a quite neat little spinner slider setup named finger. Instead of going through building the entire custom attribute definition for you in script, I already have one available that I'm going to put on the character that's going to have all the items. Now I've actually broken it down into multiple parameter blocks because I actually have multiple rollouts, one for each finger. This is to try and break up all the spinners and sliders so they're not just all jammed together in one big list. You can actually see a definition of them a little bit better. You can also close and open rollouts to try and make your whole interface a little bit smaller if you're not needing a certain finger at a given time. So what I'll do is I'll work with this attribute definition that I have. I'll just delete my modifier again. add it to the top modifier and the definition, and I can do this right in the few too many T's in attributes. And no R. That's where I went wrong. There we go. Okay, so here's our attribute definition now added. This is the nice thing about having them stored off in a separate script. I can reuse this and reuse this and reuse this on characters as much as I like. And using methods that I outlined in the intermediate rigging DVD1, we can edit these custom attributes, change them up, whatever we need for any given character at any given time. The pen attribute holder now will hold value changes when we want to set a pose. So I can just scrub some around now. It's not obviously going to make any changes on screen to any bones because we haven't connected it up. Type in a name, press add, reset will reset them all, and scrubbing the slider with that preset selected will scrub the sliders and spinners up to the values that are stored. I'm just going to delete all the presets for now because we don't need them.